and welcome to another edition of the Double A Team. I'm your host, Stephen Negishi, and welcome to the program. And thank you for joining us tonight on this new episode. As you can tell, I'm solo, and Ken Fang, my co-host, unfortunately, is not feeling well tonight, and he couldn't make it at the last moment. So I'm going solo once again. I'm wishing my co-host Ken speedy recovery. Unfortunately, he's having some high temperature to deal with. So, between me and Ken, we've had some health problems that we had to deal with in the past. And I hope those of you watching us tonight are doing very, very well. And, it's a reminder that, COVID is, it's still out there. We don't know if what Ken's ailment is still anything related to COVID, but I hope it isn't, and that Ken will be back to normal, and he'll be joining us again 2 weeks from tonight on August 22nd. So I'll be going solo, and we're going to bring in our very first guest tonight. We've very, very, very fortunate to have had a lot of great guests working in the industry already, whether it's a writer, television reporter, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to change up a little bit tonight. The business of sports, I think a lot of you probably hear so much about it, from the streaming deals to business transactions, sponsorship, et cetera, et cetera. Full disclosure, I studied sports management myself as a master's program at the George Washington University in the Washington, D.C. Back in 2002, a year after 9/11. And I am completely working in a different field, but, the business of sports is very, very intriguing. It is growing at a rapid rate. And, it's a legitimate business field that, both old and young people are interested in learning. And I am very, very fortunate to have this gentleman who is kind enough to join us tonight before he goes on his annual trip to Europe on a business conference. Nicholas Masafumi Watanabe, a associate professor at the College of Hospitality, Retail, and Sports Management at the University of South Carolina. He's actually also born and raised in Champaign, correct? And
yes.
Went to University of Illinois. His whole family, his wife and everybody are all University of Illinois Fighting Illini family member. Nick, thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I hope Ken is feeling better soon as well.
Yeah, Ken was looking forward to this one, and we'll carry on the show tonight. Nick, why don't you tell us about your background and how you kind of got into teaching sports management?
I can give you the 1-minute version, or I can give you like the 3-hour version. I'll do the quick one. I was born in Champaign, Illinois. I grew up there for my childhood. We had a brief stint in California, but then I did junior high and high school in Japan. My dad's Japanese. As I was saying earlier, he's from Hiroshima, but I did junior high and high school in Fukuoka. He required that I went back to the U.S. to do my college, and as a graduate with his PhD from the University of Illinois in engineering, he said, "You will go to the University of Illinois and study engineering." So I went to the University of Illinois to study engineering. True story, I was on the academic probation my first semester.
Wow.
So I was not the glowing star in engineering. I then, one of my friend's brothers, who was also at Illinois, was studying sport management. And I asked him, I was like, should I transfer into it as an undergrad? He's like, well, you're already your third year. Why don't you come with me and work in Chicago, and then you can get your master's degree afterwards. So he was working for the Chicago Fire. I was fortunate. It was early in the MLS era. Chicago Fire had only been around for 3 years at that point in 2000. Mm-hmm. So I literally just walked onto the set and said, hire me. They hired me first as an intern and then as a part-time paid employee. I did pretty much everything from customer experience, fan events, event management, you name it, sales, marketing. It was all hands on deck, early days of an expansion franchise, led by the great hero of Chicago soccer, if you ask me, Peter Wilt, who has launched numerous professional teams in Chicago and other areas, such as the Indy 11, Ford Madison. All of those have been heavily with Peter Wilt's involvement. So I was doing all of this. And then, I'm doing my master's at Illinois, and I realize I'm in a seminar, and who would eventually become my advisor, Dr. Brad Humphreys, who's one of the great sports economists of the world, is presenting.
Sure.
And a lot of people are not understanding fully some of the statistical stuff he's doing. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, because I did this like sophomore year in engineering. And so I think they realized I had sort of a research mind. And so they switched me from the pro track to the research track. And the rest is history. I then went on to get my PhD also at Illinois under the supervision of Dr. Humphreys. After that, my wife also got her degree from the same department. We basically started the sport management program at the University of Missouri. Successfully launched that. We grew from 0 to 550 students in 2 years.
Wow.
That tells you the popularity of our field and what the major can do. Following that, we went to Ole Miss and actually helped them launch their program, which is growing rapidly. They have a very excellent undergraduate and master's program, especially in sport analytics. So if anybody's interested in sport analytics, it's a really good program to look at with what they're doing. And then we were given the opportunity to come here to South Carolina, and it was too good of an opportunity to sort of pass up. Their South Carolina, I mean, very, I don't like to tout rankings too much, but they're very high in a lot of the rankings, both sport business, PhD, master's, undergraduate. You look at it, they're high in the rankings. But more importantly, they had a very good pedigree in terms of a large faculty, large student body, successful growth. You're interviewing me, but I can point to other people that you should probably interview from our department. Susan O'Malley, who's one of our professors of practice, the first female head of a professional sport team in the U.S. With the then Washington Bullets, the Capital One Arena. She's the one who essentially put it together. Danny Morrison, also in our department, was the president of the Charlotte Panthers. So, I feel like I'm sort of a small fry. I mean, I just, I helped DeMarcus Beasley find what flavor of Gatorade he needed and pour it into an all-sport bottle. My wife just came back. She was working the Winter Olympic Games for NBC in Beijing. So, I feel like experience-wise, I'm sort of the bottom of the barrel.
Wow, that's quite a accomplishment and the the impressive resume that you bring to the table, Nick. I wanted to know about the. I don't know if this is a right question, but it's a very interesting, it's a very lucrative and somewhat a very attractive field. But what's like the biggest misconception people have about studying sports management, sports business, and that that you find yourself shaking your head from time to time when you talk to students, both undergrad and graduate level?
Well, it's funny because the first misconception, I think, is that a lot of people get into the field thinking, oh, if I get into this field, I can own a sport team. And unfortunately, I tell them, this is not the field to own a major league team. You need to, I tell them, even if you win the lottery, you're not going to be winning the team. You need to be going into some kind of financial investment and join the right hedge fund and make a few $1 billion, and then we can have that conversation. So, that's the first one. I think the second one is a lot of people think, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go work for my favorite sport team and I get to watch all the games. Well, I can tell you, I worked for the Chicago Fire and I wasn't actually even event staff. So I should have been able to watch a lot of the games, but there are many games where I can tell you, like, oh, this happened. You're going to spend an hour dealing with this problem. in the concourse under Old Soldier Field, which thank goodness they renovated that place because it was literally falling apart.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My goodness. Full disclosure, I wanted to become like a sports agent, and that's where I ended up going to the sports management. But then I realized you had to go to the law school and also pass the certified agent program. That
Yes.
each sports leagues organization administers. So that quickly went out of the window for me. So that's one thing I ended up learning the hard way myself as well. Um, you mentioned sports analytics. It's obviously you teach. Obviously with your engineering background, it comes in handy. I know a lot of people rely on analytics. I know there are those, like a hardcore sports radio guys, the tough guys, the experienced guys who've been on the air for a long, long time despise that to a degree. Why do you think people have a love-hate relationship with the, like kind of like a sports analytics and stuff like that?
Well, I think one of the first things is while I think our discussions in the US seem very polarized, when you start talking like analytics in football, aka soccer in the UK, I mean,
Right.
there are people who are like literally like, you are killing this game. Right. They don't want to hear it. But every team has it now, right? So
Sure.
it's a difficult point. I think the point that it's polarizing is right. It's innovation, and a lot of people often don't respond well to innovation when it first shows up,
Hmm.
and we often fear what we don't understand. So I think the
Yeah.
people who are often mad or hate analytics are typically those people I think who aren't taking the time to try to just even gain a little bit of education. Like, what's a war score? It takes you 3 minutes to read what a war score is and get the general understanding. I mean, when you look at it, wins above replacement, it's pretty simple, even in its name, right? It's not some, you know, crazy metric that somebody made. They have these metrics now that get a little bit out of control. But wins above replacement is a very simple one. How much better is this person at producing wins than the average replacement player at that position, right? And so oh, okay, so this person produces 5 wins. Well, what does that mean? Well, then you go and you look at it and you go, oh, very few people actually can produce that many. So that means they're actually a good player in this sense, right? So if they take the time to educate themselves, I think, it would be the case that, they'd be more receptive to it. I also do think that there is some pandering there where they're like, oh, my audience thinks this is stupid, so I'm going to play up on it and that tough guy act, and then it does well for them. At the same time, I'll go on the flip side. I think there's people who overly rely on analytics, who basically are just hunting for any statistical meaning without actually necessarily thinking, does this even make sense? Right? Oh, the team ate pizza at this hotel at this time and and this guy hit a home run the next day, so we're going to give him pizza at the hotel. No, I mean, that's the point where you've gone a little bit off the rails, right? It should be something that's meaningful, which is where I think analytics is evolving. So like when Theo was with the Cubs,
Yeah.
he wasn't just bringing in the sport analytics guys. He was bringing like that guy from NASA who did a lot of the human behavior, because he was trying to understand, okay, we have all these numbers, but what is a way for us to actually understand so that it impacts the behavior in a way that we want it to, right? And I think that's the key. And I think the real important thing, and the business literature is starting to show us this, is that you can have all the analytics in the world, but if you don't have the both the intelligence and emotional intelligence to use it correctly, you'll still fail, right? So, a lot of times people say, oh, the analytics didn't work for this team. And I was like, maybe it's not the analytics. Maybe it's the way the analytics were translated or actually put out and employed or operationalized by the team.
We're speaking with Nick Watanabe, who is an associate professor at the University of South Carolina, teaching the sports management at their esteemed sports management program. joining us on the Barroom Network. Ken Fang is off tonight due to his sickness. I'm going solo on the AA team. Thanks for joining us tonight. Nick, what do teams, obviously you mentioned Theo, and, he's somewhat of obviously a cult figure here in Chicago for helping us win the World Series after 109 years, but also he ended up leaving the team in a somewhat of a lurch, obviously with the the player acquisitions and trying to go for it again and again and again. But other than the player performances, what do teams, organizations, and even the sponsors use the analytics and data for? Perhaps getting the metrics of sponsorships as well as the return of their investments, etc. Is that something you work closely with the teams and companies as some sort of a consultant role as well?
Well, first off, I'll say I'm glad you said "we" in reference to the Cubs, because I'm also a Cubs fan, and we won't talk about the team that's to the south side of the city. But
we have a separate show for that one. So we have a separate show for that one every Monday. So
okay.
If you're a White Sox fan and if you want to join on that show, you're more than welcome to follow our network for the South Burbs Hitman. That's the name.
I'm happy to talk to any fan base, right? I don't let my own personal fandom try to get in the way of anything. When you say, how do we use analytics? And this is the funny thing, people, say analytics like it's a new thing, but I can point to people have been using analytics in business for centuries.
Right.
In some sense, right? They've been counting and making decisions based on quantitative data. Now, our tools are more advanced, but if you think about it, most of the modeling now is just an evolution of the stuff that we've been doing, for example, in economics for, several decades, which goes back to Gauss, which is 100, 200 years ago. Sorry, I'm not remembering my mathematical history here. But what are we doing? I mean, we are helping teams understand what are the factors that predict attendance? What are the factors that predict revenue? What factors predict lift in sponsorship, right? That's one we've done with a professional sport team and trying to predict, what are fans responding to? What can they recall? I'm sort of moving into the new realm, which is the digital realm, right? So I actually am doing a lot of economic and predictive analysis for things such as social media. I have several papers, actually with my wife, who's the smarter theoretician of our family, so she can actually make my stuff make sense and writes much better than myself. But ourselves, Dr. Brian Sebbing, who's at the University of Alberta, all three of us are University of Illinois graduates, so no coincidence there. We published a series of papers that look at what are the factors that bring people to social media accounts for sport teams, right? And, you think some of this stuff's obvious, but, it actually isn't always obvious. So we do things like that. We've moved into the realm of esports. So like actually predicting viewership on digital platforms, like what is bringing a customer to watch esports? Right. And it's not just what brings them, because, views these days, anybody can view something, right? You just click on it 30 seconds later, I'm bored, you click to the next thing.
Right.
So we're also like trying to look at the length of viewing, right? So I think that's like a very important concept. And that goes back to this Herbert Simon, this Nobel Prize winner, this idea of the attention economy, which is a theory my wife actually brought forward in our paper. And so what we're doing is we're actually sort of looking at the economy of attention in the digital realm in relation to sports. So a lot of teams actually shown interest. We do this thing called network analysis, where we actually map out all the different accounts in social media and show how they connect and talk to one another. We have a paper from the Champions and Final that shows how the network continuously reorganizes itself throughout, where people will pay attention to a person because they scored a goal, and then they'll just jump to the next thing and the next thing. So, there's all these different ways which we're helping sport teams sort of better identify what are the things that they need to pay attention to be successful, especially as they move forward into our new, digital economy.
obviously the social media has expanded our out made the sports more accessible. Twitter, Twitch, the streaming, etc., etc. Um, I want to know more about the social media and the digital economy to a degree. What kind of trend are you seeing right now that the teams, maybe the professional athletes globally are doing right now to enhance their brands, etc. We know about the NILs and the NCAA.
Yes.
You work in college, you hear so much about it. Obviously, South Carolina is a very big school. It's very football program, basketball, and the baseball program has been very very popular as well. I want to know about the individual branding and the NIL and do you work on that side of it, or do you advise schools and the individuals about the NILs and etc.?
I haven't worked directly on the NIL. What I actually worked on, a little different segue, is myself and two of my co-authors. We actually wrote a paper on attendance and the sort of change right before NIL when they started to give stipends to players.
Right.
And one of the NCAA's core arguments was if they pay players more, fans love amateurism. So if they pay players more, attendance is going to go down. And in fact, what our results show is after they paid players, there was no impact or even maybe an upward trend of attendance. So that actually was introduced in the legal battle as evidence all the way up into, I believe, the Supreme Court. So my name sits somewhere in a Supreme Court document for a sport law paper that I helped write that we use these analytics for, basically to sort of look at whether paying players was impacting consumer decision making. It looks like it really doesn't, which is logical, right? If you just ask any college sport fan, if your favorite wide receiver on your favorite college sport teams get paid $1,000, you're going to stop watching? No. I mean, maybe there's like one or two people, but I think the majority of people are like, no, that doesn't affect me, right? So, what you say in a survey isn't actually what you do in reality. And so that's another thing, is right, because they were trying to show surveys that said, oh, I love amateurism, and I'll change my behaviors if amateurism goes away. But what we find is amateurism goes away, well, fully hasn't gone away. Amateurism goes partly away, and people are still coming.
Sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they may say it, but their behavior actually didn't change. So that was one segue. If we go back to your original question about the sort of trends, I guess, for sport branding, I think the first thing I always say is the athlete is always bigger than the team in almost every other sport but college sport. Right. And that's, I think, where we're going to see maybe this change, because Cristiano Ronaldo has way more followers than any team he plays for. Manchester United, Juventus, Real Madrid, he blows them out of the water. Right. Same thing with Messi, same thing with even in Major League Baseball. I remember when I was collecting this data back in 2014, 2015, I cannot remember. Somebody joins the Seattle Mariners, and he literally is got 5 times as many followers as the team does, right? And the teams do better now, right?
Sure.
But it's still the fact that people want to see, I think, the personality. And so I think that's the big thing to pay attention to right now in college sport is, will college athletes emerge to become more popular than their school's brands, or will that not change? I think that's sort of, I think, the space I'm looking at in terms of NIL and college and social media branding, is I think there's an interesting change that's going to happen there. And I encourage any professors or grad students listening to this, please do this research. I think it'd be very interesting. I'm too busy to pick up this project right now, but there's your freebie. But I think it would be very interesting to see how this changes through the NIL era. Mm-hmm.
Well, the number of college, high school athletes already getting massive deals, throughout this ordeal, it's just kind of you just mentioned the athletes themselves are getting bigger than the school itself. I think we're kind of seeing more towards that trend, and it'll be interesting to see if with the massive conference realignment that is taking place, that will continue to be the case, and if NCAA themselves can they reinforce it, or do we have to have like a new organization that the Power Five conferences will have their own ruling, whether it's the playoffs, the conference realignments, the NILs and so forth. Obviously it'll be interesting to see. It seems as though a lot of people have this disdain towards NCAA for a long, long time, and obviously NCAA is kind of becoming an afterthought in this NIL deal, even though they're the ones who kind of agreed upon it and reinforcing it. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, if athletes are going to continue to get their money even in this economy and so forth.
Yeah, I think like with the NCAA, I think there obviously needs some level of regulation in college athletics. I just don't know if NCAA is the right answer for it if they don't evolve with the times.
Absolutely.
Just got to be, every business evolves. And if you're not willing and able to do that and think we're just going to stick to something that was decided in court a long time ago and hope that keeps us going, it's, that's not how a business grows. That's how a business fails.
We're talking with Nicholas Masafumi Watanabe, who is the sports professor, associate professor at the University of South Carolina, joining us on the AA team tonight. Stephen Negishi's doing solo. Ken Fang is off tonight. A couple of questions, and we'll wrap it up for you. I know you are heading out to Europe probably when? Tomorrow, this week?
Oh, no, next week. So
I'm
actually leaving on the 20th.
Okay. What, if you don't mind sharing, how often do you go to Europe, and what is your purpose of this trip upcoming?
I go to the UK a lot. I've never been to mainland Europe, so this is the.
Oh, okay, UK. Okay.
So I guess now with Brexit, I don't know really if continental Europe would want to consider the UK part of Europe, but all my trips have been to the UK. Actually, a lot of my travel usually goes to Asia. That's usually been sort of my hotbed for doing stuff. I've taught sport management, sport business in China, in Japan, etc., as well as actually Qatar. So we have a joint degree program with the Qatar Foundation, has HBKU, one of the Qatar universities there, and they have a Master's of Sport and Entertainment Management. It's a joint degree. Right. So students get classes taught by their faculty and our faculty and earn a dual degree. It's a really wonderful program. And I actually go over to Qatar about once a year for about usually 4 to 6 weeks and teach sport there. And it's such a wonderful program. And, they're gearing up for the World Cup, and that's part of what our program is helping to build that expertise so that not only can they have a successful event, but that they can have a successful sort of legacy beyond that and continue to have sport as a part of their economy.
I see. You mentioned about the upcoming World Cup in Qatar. Obviously, it's met with a lot of shrouded with controversy with the treatments of the immigrants who are brought from another country, Nepal, among others, just to build stadiums and hotels, et cetera, et cetera. Even last year at this time, we had the Olympics in Tokyo. Despite a lot of criticism and protest, even by the locals, about the hot weather and the massive concerns about the outbreak, et cetera, they still ended up doing it, as you remember. And we've had Professor Jules Boykoff, who I'm sure you might have heard about, the sports ethics professor.
I love Jules. I met him at a conference in Vancouver. He's a wonderful person.
We had him on our show back in.
I remember this. Yes. Yeah. I watched this episode.
Yeah, we were still, Ken and I were still somewhat green, and we were, still finding our way there. But I'm very curious about the sports and the morality and the so-called whitewashing that we hear we all know in recent months about the Live Tour and the involvement of Saudi, et cetera, et cetera. Um, it's basically people claim talk about the morality, but people who are involved in the sports, they're obviously money talks. We all know that, even
Yeah.
if it's Saudi, whether it's Saudi, Qatar, or even hell, China, and even North Korea, if they have any money, from Kim Jong Il for that matter. But where do you stand on this? The whitewashing in sports and the ethics. As somebody who teaches, the business side of sports, because we all know that business in any industry is riddled with, shrouded with a lot of controversies, the moralities, people breaking rules all the time. Where do you stand on that issue as a professor?
Well, let's just say I probably am going to be biased on this because if you actually look at my work, I've done several papers on athlete activism and
Mm-hmm.
the sort of construction as well as the economics of activism. I was at Missouri when the protest happened at the University of Missouri. Um, I can tell you several people in the first photo, right, where they basically said we're going on strike, were students in my class at the time, right? And I really admired what they did, right? They were taking a stand. This was a time where student athletes, and I really don't even like to use that term, right? But college athletes is what I should be saying, where college athletes were not as well protected. And they still took a stand, and I think they did a great job. And so, it becomes a difficult situation in our current economy in the sport business world is at what point do you take the money and participate in this quote unquote sport washing, as we would call it now. And at what point do you say, there's a line? And then how do you set that line? And is it something you're doing that's fair across the board? And I think that's a really difficult thing. When I teach, even my big data class or my economic class, we actually talk about things like discrimination in those classes because they actually are critical things that we need to understand within the business world. People are like, well, what does discrimination have to do with big data and analytics? Well, when you program a computer to recognize people's faces, but you only have it programmed off the engineers in your office and they're 95% white or Asian males, guess what? You're going to have a ton of errors when it starts to look at other races or other genders. And so if we think about that, right, it is a critical component we need to understand. So in my viewpoint, we need to be talking about it and organizations need to be involved in it and need to know where they're going to stand. I'm not going to tell organizations where to stand, but they should be ready to say, this is our standpoint and we're going to stand behind it. And also be ready that there'll be backlash.
Yeah.
Because I think no matter where we're at in today's society, one side or the other is going to have some backlash against it. And then you're going to ask yourself, if we're taking this stand and it's the right thing to do, maybe it's okay we lose a little bit of revenue. 1% of people go away, we lose 1% of revenue. It's not great. But I would feel better morally and ethically to forego that 1% of revenue, knowing that we did the right thing and that we're taking care of our players. Because athlete health, athlete mental health, athlete wellness is something that has been ignored way too much in the sport business perspective, and it's something we need to really focus on as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to end the interview with this question, or maybe just probably some sort of a word to whoever's watching this show. Anybody who's interested in obviously becoming working in the sports business, anybody who's interested in either their son or daughter in college, perhaps wanting to study, or anybody who's in their mid careers wanting to change careers and wanting to go into sports because they love it so much. What are your advice and from application to the studying? process. We've kind of touched on the misconception about the sports, studying sports and sports management. But what are your, advice and recommendations to the future students wanting to study sports management, whether it's at your school or any other school?
So I tell this to any student who comes, whether they're applying here or another school. You need to find the program that fits you best, right? You may think, oh, all these people talk about this is the best program, but I really feel like I fit better here. You should go where you think you will be most successful. Old 1960s, 50s Coast theorem, University of Chicago, you should go where you're most valued, right? That's essentially what he was saying, and that won him the Nobel Prize. I tell that to people. You need to go where you're most valued. And so don't just go in because something's ranked highest. Go somewhere where you think you're going to become successful. I would also say do your research. Know what you're getting into, because the sport industry is one where you're going to have to move 4 or 5 times on average before you really land that sort of full-time gig that's going to be more long-lasting and comfortable. So you be ready to do that. I think you should also realize that you get a sport management degree doesn't mean you have to work for a sport team. You could work for State Farm, who has a giant in Bloomington department. I was saying say giant, but they have a department that's focused on sports sponsorship, right? So getting the sport management degree doesn't limit you to teams, right? There's a whole world out there. So do your research and understand what you're getting into and all the different opportunities that you can have. And as I tell everybody, at this day and age, I think you should also do things that, you think are fun and exciting. I just started my own fun, exciting project. I'm writing about soccer and publishing it on Substack. That's something I'm doing, but it's also somewhat related to the work I do, right? So I think it's important for people to have the passion, right? And that's part of my passion project, is finding different ways to sort of show everything I've done and show how excited and what I can learn and hopefully help others learn.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up the interview. And, Nick, I cannot thank you enough for making time. I know the school year is almost upon us. You have a trip to Europe next week, and you have to probably come back and start preparing for the brand new school year and everything. So we cannot thank you enough for coming on. And as a fellow Japanese American, and I appreciate you taking time to come on our show. And I hope our viewers who were curious about learning sports management got a lot out of it. And hopefully they will reach out to you on Twitter at Watanabe2K, and also maybe reach out to the South Carolina program, as well as, like you said, do their research. It's not an easy field. You're not going to make money effective immediately upon graduating, whether it's undergrad or graduate degree. So hopefully people will understand and took note of our conversations tonight. Nicholas Watanabe, Associate Professor at the University of South Carolina, thank you so much, and we hope to have you on again to talk about the business side of sports, and whenever you're available.
Thank you. I'd love to be back.
Thank you so much, and good luck to you. Good luck to you, and our next guest, Cody, will be very, very happy to hear that. Thank you so much, Nick. We'll take a break, and we'll be back with Cody Delmendo, Cubs reporter from CHGO, right after this.
Yes, it's too early. I think it's quite obvious that both he and Matt Eberflus are playing the long game here. I imagine they were given a pretty long leash by George McCaskey, so they aren't looking to patch things together like the last regime did. I think expectations are quite modest this year because they're going to have a boatload of cap space heading into the 2023 season, potentially over $100 million. Now, they won't have many guys under contract, so that money's going to go fast, but Ryan Poles is taking this opportunity to build this team exactly how he wants to. I think fans will be patient as Bears fans get, at least in 2022, because they want to see their franchise quarterback take another step forward, but also understand that this isn't exactly a Super Bowl roster on paper. I think this position was attractive to Ryan Poles because he saw the opportunity to build this team from scratch because of the upcoming cap flexibility.
And welcome back to the Double A team on the Barroom Network. Stephen Negishi going solo tonight. If you're joining us, Ken is off tonight. He's had some health issues that unfortunately he could not go on our show tonight. All right, our next guest. Oh, before we go, I want to thank Nick Watanabe, Associate Professor of Sports Management at the University of South Carolina, for coming on once again. Nick, thank you once again. He's a big Cubs fan, and he's going to stick around to watch the rest of our show tonight, because our next guest, been working for a little bit of time to get him on our show. He just finished his pregame show on the CHGO YouTube channel, which I'm sure if you're a Chicago sports fan, you might have heard and follow them on their website. Cubs reporter Cody Delmendo is joining us on our show. Cody, thanks for joining us. I know you just had to finish up your show early tonight, and I'm sure you're still probably in the studio there. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I'm currently in our conference room right now. So yeah, we just finished. Thanks for asking me to come on, Stephen. I always see you in our chat on YouTube and stuff. So. And I know we've interacted on Twitter a few times, so
yes, sir.
Appreciate the support, and thanks for having me on your show. It's I've only had this job since March, and it's still weird when people ask me to come on their podcast, because that wasn't a thing. So I appreciate it, man.
Well, especially if you've never heard of us, our show, we're still, very small by the numbers, but we're growing. But, a lot of viewers, on our network, we're a big Chicago sports people. We primarily do the Bears stuff during the football season, but we also, talk a lot about the Cubs and the White Sox. We have a White Sox specific show that normally comes on our show afterwards. But tell us about CHGO, how it got started, and how you ended up landing in the CHGO. About your career so far.
Well, I'll try to sum it up as fast as I can.
Right. Eastern University graduate.
Eastern Illinois. I like to call it the Harvard of the Midwest. It was a football school. It's turned into a baseball school recently. They've had a couple of guys get drafted the last couple of years, which is exciting. So when I was at Eastern, I was a journalism major with a concentration in writing and reporting. I worked a little bit at the student radio station, and I did a little bit with the yearbook, and I did a little bit with the student newspaper. I didn't really do anything full-time for any of them because I wanted to have a life. When I think back to it, there's times where I wish I would have done more. Maybe my career path would have been a lot easier to get to this point. But, I don't regret how I did college. It was a lot of fun, and I had a great time, made a lot of friends, and met a lot of great people. And, that's honestly how to get to this point, it all started with, just straight networking, meeting people. And that's honestly how I got this job. Before I came to CHGO, I used to do a podcast with a buddy I went to college with, two buddies I went to college with, actually. It was called the Skies Falling Podcast. We had a very small following. We'd be happy if we got 100 downloads an episode. We'd do one show a week, and if we hit 100 downloads in a week, I would be ecstatic about it, because just the fact that 100 people wanted to even just consider downloading it would just really hit different in my soul. But it was a Chicago sports podcast too, and the reason we called it The Skies Falling is because the Bears just continuously disappoint us year in and year out. It was mainly that, we started in 2020, so we knew the Cubs were starting to trend down, and the Bulls were still rebuilding, and
Yeah.
you know, the Blackhawks. I mean, we're admittedly the guys I did it with, we weren't big hockey guys, but they weren't good either. And none of us were White Sox fans, so we really didn't care that the White Sox were starting to trend up in 2020. We would try to talk about them the best we could, just for the sake of the base. Yeah, so that's kind of the take behind the name of it on how that started. And long story short, I had Kevin Kaduk, who is now the head of content here at CHGO. I had him on that podcast in, I want to say, January 2020. Literally, he was the second guest I ever had on the show. The podcast had only existed for 3 weeks at the time. At that time, I was like, man, if 30 people listen to this thing, that'd be cool. And he had just launched his newsletter. It was called the Midway Minute. Yeah. And I saw it come upon my Twitter timeline at the time, and was started to think, how can I get more people to listen to the show? And I saw his thing, and it was all about the Chicago sports newsletter. And I learned that he used to work at Yahoo, and he had a pretty decent sized following. And I was like, maybe he could help us bring in some new listeners. So when he launched that, I just reached out to him. I was like, hey man, saw you started this new newsletter. Would love to talk to you about it, that kind of thing. I didn't know who he was. I just, reached out, kind of like how you reached out to me, right? Mm-hmm. And he came on the show. We made I think that was the start of just a decent friendship, where there were times we DM'd on Twitter after that, and we tweeted at each other a few times. He's just a solid dude for up until March, before I actually met him in person for the first time. I didn't really have anything negative to say about the guy. He was, again, just a really solid dude. And so in February, before CHGO launched, he DM'd me on Twitter and was like, hey, got this cool opportunity you might be interested in. If you want to hear more about it, can I shoot you a phone call? And at that time, I was working from home at my previous job, and it was a Friday at 3 p.m., so I was not really doing anything. And so he gets me on a call with him and tells me all about what CHGO is going to be whenever they launch in March. And next thing you know, I'm quitting my job 2 weeks later, and here I am. I feel like my way or my path of getting to here is just straight networking. I honestly wouldn't tell people to go to college to do what I do. I would tell people to I wouldn't say copy other people, but I would say build your own brand in a way, find a way to get people to like you for whatever your niche is, whether for me, it's the Cubs or just Chicago sports or sports betting, other people, whatever it is, figure that out and create a base that way. It's easier said than done. Yeah. But network through, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, find a way to meet new people that are in the industry that, you're not always going to meet the best people. I promise you, there are some people out there in this industry that I don't like, that, all I ever did was try to be cool with them or be their friend, because I just wanted to make friends in the industry for so long. I mean, I spent 7 years trying to get a full-time job in sports media. There was no easy path to getting here. I have a bunch of previous jobs since I graduated from Eastern that left me wondering if I could ever get a job in this industry. Yeah. And now I am here now, and it's still wild for me to think about. We're 5 months in, and it's still wild for me to really think about, but I somehow did it. And I have a lot of credit goes to Kevin, just because I had that relationship with him, and he thought high of me. And it's something that I will never forget, and that I will always appreciate him for. So whether I'm here for ever or wherever, if I eventually go somewhere else that's bigger, I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to do after this, or if I'm just going to stay here. But I find this job is finally my real big foot in the door, and major Chicago sports media. So it's really exciting for me. Again, I went through a bunch of really shitty jobs. And that's kind of like, I was listening to Nick whenever you guys were talking about sports management stuff. And like, that's a lot of how getting into the media industry is you just pay your dues and you have to basically do a bunch of jobs that you don't want to do. And you got to do a bunch of stuff for free. I mean, I did that podcast with my buddies for free. I joined On Tap Sportsnet during that time as well. And that's how I became popular on Cubs Twitter for some people, because I did the Cubs podcast there, and we had a lot of fun. A lot of people tuned in. We created a really solid base there, and and that's another reason why Kevin reached out to me, because he knew I did that show too, and it was mainly Cubs. So so that's the best way I can explain it without taking up another hour.
No. Yeah, I mean, your story is very inspiring, and I'm glad you mentioned Nick Watanabe, and you caught the gist of probably toward the end of the questions about the recommendations, as well as the any advice for anybody who's applying for the sports management program. I studied sports management myself, and I went into a completely different field in IT. For years I felt like a loser for not being able to land a job in the sports management, etc. And it took me a while to overcome that, but because of the internet and YouTube nowadays, I get to have like a sports show that I co-host with my co-host Ken Fang, who unfortunately is not with us tonight because of the health issues and stuff. So obviously, you really hustled, and your stories are very inspiring, and it's something that I kind of I wouldn't want to say that mirroring image, obviously, because you're doing much more bigger things and you're doing this full time than I am. But I hope a lot of people, whether you're just joining us now, you could go back to watch the whole interview that I did with Nick Watanabe, and catch the very first interview with Cody, and find some sort of inspiration about hustling, and then be persistent and believing yourself.
I could sit here and talk to you for probably 2 hours about like just my journey to how I got to this point, because there's so many things that I did or didn't do that led to how I am here now. And like, there's just no easy path. Like, if you want an easy path to a job, like go to school to be like an accountant or something. Like that's the best. Like if you really want it that easy, and you just want to make a lot of money, like do that. But if you want to do something that you're genuinely passionate about, and you're not going to make a lot of money at the beginning, then you better like really have the passion to do it. And then stick to it, and then be willing to do other things that you really don't want to do for however long. And again, just network yourself with so many people. Absolutely.
We're speaking with Cody Delmendo, Cubs reporter with CHGO on the AA team tonight. Well, we brought you here not just to talk about your career, but because obviously the struggle that is the Chicago Cubs. Before
we have to talk about them.
I know now it's just downhill from here. But before we went on air tonight, we had a very big breaking news tonight about the one of the most polarizing Cubs player in recent years, who came on our show tonight. Before one of the most polarizing Cubs player who came on. I'm going to share the screen with you. Jason Hayward, who have been on the deal for pretty much all of this year, at least part of the first half, and pretty much non-existent in the second half. Jesse Rogers, who covered the Cubs and baseball for ESPN, tweeted tonight that Jed Hoyer said Hayward won't be back with the team next year. And also turns out that, next year he will not be playing with us as well. So basically this is it for Jason Hayward. His contract was supposed to expire, but obviously he won't be playing. More likely he'll just probably retire either this year or maybe sometime next year. Cody, I'm sure as a diehard Cubs fan, you've had your, you have feelings, good or bad, with the Jason Hayward. What was the feeling inside the CHGO when you heard this news?
I think we were all pretty shocked, to be honest with you. I have been sitting in this office saying that the Cubs needed to DFA him for, honestly, since day one. If we were, since probably on the very first show that we did for CHGO Cubs, I probably said something related to the Cubs need to DFA Jason Hayward. But that doesn't mean that I never didn't like the guy, or I never thought he was a good baseball player in some aspect.
Absolutely.
Some people really, really can't stand the guy. And to an extent, I can understand, because, I mean, he was the highest paid player on this roster for most of his tenure. I think John Lester might have beat him out for a few years, but obviously this year, the highest paid player on the Cubs. Actually Stroman might be, but either way, he's one of the top paid players on the team. And clearly he never lived up to the contract. And Cubs fans will, for, the amount of times I've read, Jason Hayward's the worst contract in Chicago sports history, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. Like, I get it. I totally get it. Yeah. The only reason that I kind of snap back at that is that there's been so many other guys who have come to the Cubs and at least have not even performed, but also just not been a good guy. Milton Bradley is like my prime example.
Milton Bradley,
he was not only was he not good, but he also just wasn't a good clubhouse guy.
Yeah, he wasn't even a good human being at all. Yeah, I believe he had been busted, had a run-in with the law too.
Right. So. That was after the Cubs, but yes. But anyway, I mean, I just think that Jason Hayward, he was part of the World Series team, and he didn't hit. I think he had 2 hits that entire 2016 team. Or 2016 postseason run, but I don't know. Because that he was on that team, it's hard for me to be like, this guy was the worst player the Cubs ever brought in. This guy, blah blah this, but like I can't go that far. But I will say that like he was, he won a couple Gold Gloves here. He was clearly one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball during like the early years of being here. The only thing that I will say that like isn't sticking up for him is that perhaps the Cubs aren't in this moment of rebuilding or whatever Jed Hoyer wants to call it. They're not in this situation if Jason Hayward was just performing to the type of player that he was paid to be.
Right.
And maybe things in 18 or 19 and 20 or even 2018 are different if he's performing to the player that he's paid to be. And I thought in 2019 and 2020 were his best years with the Cubs, but they still weren't like, they didn't change the team. His, all the advanced stats don't really show that he was more than just an average player. For most of his tenure with the Cubs, he was just a very average baseball player, offensively at least.
Yeah.
This year and last year, the defense had really started to fall apart. But, again, that's the only thing I will say against him is that maybe the Cubs are in a different situation if he was just performing. I mean,
exactly.
I don't get mad about the Cubs giving him the contract. He was young and he was coming off one of the best seasons of his career with the Cardinals. Yeah. Like, if so many Cubs fans want to sit on Twitter or wherever and glamour about Carlos Correa, like, it's the same type of situation. Of course, Carlos Correa has had a really good career to this point, but who's to say that if you give him a giant 7 or 8 year contract, who's to say he doesn't come to Wrigley and does like basically the same thing?
Exactly.
That is the risk with free agency. I mean, we saw it this year. Like, I didn't think Jonathan VR was going to be as bad as he was. I mean, he was a 2.5 F4 player last year with the Mets. Like, that's like, I thought he would be a very nice platoon player with wisdom at third base. Sure. And it got to a point where you didn't even want to see him play defense because he just could not field the ball on a regular basis. Yeah. And then the offense wasn't there either. So, I mean, that's kind of the risk with free agency. So that's why, I am high on how the Cubs are doing things with their farm system and the guys coming up and stuff, and how the pitching infrastructure has completely changed too. So I am very high on the future. But again, with Jason Hayward, it is what it is. At least he is a good guy, and I am glad that the Cubs are at least letting him stick out the rest of the year with the roster and help be a leader or a mentor to a lot of these young guys. But it was time. It's long overdue. It should have happened probably after last season.
Yeah.
And it bothers me that he is outside of Contreras. He is like the last guy from the 2016 team. The way the thing ended, it should not have ended that way, with him being like one of the last guys. But it is what it is. We got to move on from it. I'm just glad the Cubs have finally ripped that Band-Aid off. And the reason mainly is because he was becoming like a villain to Cubs fans, in my opinion.
Right.
He didn't really deserve that. I mean, if there's anyone who deserves anything, it's the front office for giving him the contracts and everything. Him as a person, he was always a good dude, and he's great in the community. So I will always at least appreciate him for that. And he did have some good moments. Remember the walk-off grand slam. Remember in 2020, he hit a go-ahead homer off Josh Hader against the Brewers in Milwaukee. Obviously the speech in the 16 World Series,
I was going to mention that.
Maybe, you know what I mean? He did have good moments. I remember going to a game last year. He had a walk-off in April or May. And he performed okay, but just never good enough to justify all the money he made. It is what it is.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get to the front office right now. A lot of people obviously have been critically and rightfully so towards Jed Hoyer. Whenever he spoke in front of the media, a lot of people get enraged because whatever he's saying doesn't really have much to say and doesn't have a lot of pull, which is basically pretty much all sports executives. They BS their way, pretending that the fan base are, just, clueless and stupid. And obviously I don't think Jed acts that way, but the trade deadline that, that was so much being made about, trading Ian Happ, Wilson Contreras, never really happened. I was completely surprised. I know Waddle and Selby today on their show railed against him, saying that he failed the Cubs. I am as angry as anybody else with regards to Jed and Carter Hawkins, who I don't even know if he was alive or just basically missing in action because he rarely speaks or be on a camera. But how disgusted, or if you're disappointed, were you with the trade deadline? And are you happy with at least some of the trades that they got from the teams, whatever the players that they got?
Yeah, I mean, was I disgusted or pissed off that they didn't trade Happ and Contreras? I wouldn't say I was disgusted or pissed off. I would just say that I was surprised.
Yeah.
What bothers me the most is that they didn't move guys like Wisdom and Ortega and any of these other fringe guys who we just know aren't going to be part of the next good team.
Right.
Because now that they have those guys still on this roster on top of Happ and Contreras, they just have a log jam. They have some guys in Iowa right now who there isn't a spot for them on this roster unless the Cubs start DFAing guys. And they DFA'd, they didn't DFA Hayward, but he's going to be on the inactive roster. So the Cubs can technically, I guess they can't call anyone up right now because he's been on the IL anyway. So they're full at the 40-man. But again, he won't be taking up a roster spot the rest of the season, which is a positive sign. Now, Frank Schwindel, he hasn't been much in anything at all this year. He's one of the worst defensive first basemen in baseball. He's got an OPS below 700. And for a first baseman, that just ain't going to cut it. If you're not going to be good defensively and if your offense is below average at first base, you just ain't going to cut it. I feel bad for the guy. He's a great dude. He's easy to cheer for. Yeah. The story about him riding the middle seat out to San Diego after he got not DFA, but option to Iowa, and then he went on a like a 2 or 3 week tear offensively. Was fun. The last second half of last year was fun. Like, but he just isn't an everyday baseball player. I think that perhaps maybe he could be like a bench guy on a decent team, but like he just isn't an everyday guy. And the Cubs need, like, I don't think they would have been able to trade Schwindel anyway. So I feel like at this point, the countdown is next on Schwindel. So they can open up a roster spot and bring someone else up. I mean, they already optioned David Bodie, which is fine. It is what it is. Like, we know what David Bodie is.
Right.
In a
and
way,
they also DFA'd Andrelton Simmons
yes,
over
and
the
they,
weekend.
yes,
which was unfortunately long overdue. And even Ross himself said, to be honest, there's nowhere to no spot for him or nowhere to play for him. And I do agree. Schwindel really started out very nicely after Rizzo was traded. He had a good run, obviously, but obviously he is what he is, and why the teams have caught up to him. I don't understand the reason for playing Ortega over Nelson Vasquez. You've been critical about that, about the tweet and stuff like that. So, the Cubs' decision kind of leaves you baffled, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's some things that have baffled me. Now, I will say, in the trades they did make, I know Hayden Wisniewski didn't have a great first start in Iowa over the weekend. He gave up like 8 runs in his first start as a Cub. Yeah. Scott Efros gave up like a go-ahead homer to the Cardinals, I think, the other night too. So I mean, I guess at this point the trade is even. But I do like Hayden Wisniewski and what the potential there is for him. Again, I said earlier, with the Cubs pitching infrastructure on the farm, I do really like it. How they're going to manage it and who's going to be in this rotation next year outside of Marcus Stroman it still remains to be seen. I mean, I'm high on Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson, but I still think they need to sign a number 1 starter. I tweeted last night, like, after I saw Jacob deGrom put up some the MLB account put up Jacob deGrom highlights. It's like, I would do disgusting things to have him on the Cubs roster. And it's a fact. I don't care if the guy was hurt for a year or whatever. The guy is the best pitcher in baseball, or at least has the best stuff in baseball. And I would do a lot of really bad things to have him on the Cubs.
We'll keep it clean here. We'll keep it clean.
Right.
We understand.
But Wisniewski seems like a really nice piece to bring back for a guy like Efros. And the reason I'm okay with it is because the Cubs have shown, honestly, since 2019 that they were able to just put a bullpen together, like on very, very cheap deals, or just through the farm of recent, like we've seen with Brandon Hughes. Eric Ullman has had some moments. He's also had some bad months. He doesn't even have 10 appearances in the MLB yet. So I'm interested to see how he plays the rest of the season. I'm sure Ben Leeper is going to get a call up in September. We'll see what he has. Either way, I'm not even really worried about the bullpen going into 2023. I have said it on the CHGO Cubs podcast all year. I'm not even worried about the bullpen. Does that mean that the bullpen is perfect? No, but I do think that there is a lot of upside in it. And let's be real, in a lot of games this year, the Cubs are in it because they're bullpen. So when they are in it, at least. Yeah. So I'm not even worried about it. Ben Brown, another guy who came back in, I think it was the Robertson trade. That is going to be the PCA of last year. Like Ben Brown is this year's PCA, in my opinion. I think the Phillies were absolutely dumb to send a piece like that for an aging reliever and their team not even being anywhere really close to a World Series. Now, if Harper comes back and they get in the playoffs and make a run, then fine, shoot me, I was wrong. But like with the way that team is built and with how bad their farm system is, for them to move their best pitching prospect for David Robertson, that is like a sign of like being completely desperate. And again, I don't know when Ben Brown's going to be ready. He's in Double-A right now, so I assume that the Cubs will probably call him up sometime next year. Yeah. But I don't know. There's no timetable on him. But again, he's had a great 2022 season in the minors. So there's a lot of upside there. And to get that for someone like David Robertson is really encouraging. Yeah. Saul Gonzalez, the guy who came back for Michael Givens.
Michael Givens, yes.
Yeah, he's in low A or high A, one of the two. I think it's low A, actually.
Very big guy. Very big guy. 6'8", 280 or something like that.
Right. I admittedly don't know a lot. I don't really. If there's anything I could complain about, it's that I felt like Givens was so good that I thought they could have got more for him.
Yeah,
and perhaps
that's
that comes. Perhaps that comes back to, just how the deadline went for the Cubs in that last hour, or just that whole day, the final day of the deadline or before the deadline. I don't know. Now, again, why I'm not really upset about Happ and Contreras not being moved is, well, I've been saying that the Cubs, if they plan on competing in 2023, they need to keep them. So I'm not going to flip-flop. The only thing that does bother me that they did keep him is the fact that, the Cubs basically put them through this whole thing of being thinking about them getting traded and this and that. And I get they can't show their hand to the teams across the league, but they had a send-off for him at Wrigley Field, basically.
Exactly.
So it's
they did all of that, and they jerked around their emotions mentally and also physically. You mentioned the ceremony. It was a very touching and moving one, and then now they're still with the team. I'm sure the fans are happy about it, but then you're wondering if did Jed really misplay the whole market thing? Did he ask too much, or did he underestimated his own players? Obviously underperforming. Particularly Contreras, and
Contreras, he had a bad July, but I don't know. I don't think a bad July from Contreras, when you see what he has done offensively for most of his career, really means much. Now, Ian Happ, maybe they did misplay with him because they were trying to get high value for him. But at the same time, if they do make the trades and then you don't, you as a fan or me as a fan don't really think they got what they should have got back, then we're sitting here pissed off anyway. So I think in that situation, I think it was lose-lose for Jed. Again, I just think that the whole situation of basically saying that, hey, we're going to trade him, but then not trade him, even though they never actually said they're going to trade him, it just seemed like it because of what happened last year and with the way how bad the team was playing. In a way, the media definitely heightened it a lot more, but if you're going to trade Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez with the team, I don't even think the Cubs were 10 games under 500 last year when they moved those guys. If you're going to do that, but then not do it this year, of course fans are going to just assume that's going to happen. Of course the media is just going to assume that's going to happen. So I don't know. It's just a very interesting thing. Now, the whole thing that's going to solve this and is going to bring fans, I guess, back in on Jed if they ever were, is the offseason. This offseason is huge for Jed. Now, there's been many rumors from, national reporters that say that the Cubs are going to spend. Ken Rosenthal just said on his podcast today that he thinks that the Cubs are going to get one of the top shortstops on the market. John Heyman has said it, throughout the season that he thinks that the Cubs are going to spend this offseason. So I don't see high on John Heyman much, but at least if Ken Rosenthal is saying that the Cubs need to spend and that they should spend, and he thinks that they're going to get one of the top shortstops on the market this offseason, that's some credibility that I can buy into, right? Mm-hmm. So this offseason will be very telling. We'll see what they're going to do with Contreras. Happ's here for at least one more year. Maybe they try to trade Happ in the offseason. I don't know. Happ is someone who I think that you can get by without him, but depending on how much money you're going to spend, I wouldn't mind him being here for another year. Or if you extended him, give him a nice 4 or 5 year deal, and at least finally keep one of your homegrown players. So again, I understand why people were upset because it just didn't make any sense after we all went through the emotional roller coaster of it all. But I am okay that they kept them because, again, I think with what the farm system is at, with some of the guys coming up, I know everyone talks about PCA and everyone talks about Kevin Alcantara and all that, but Brennan Davis is going to be coming up next year. He's going to go play in the fall league this year, despite that injury that happened. He's going to go play in the fall league this year probably, and hopefully he comes into spring training healthy in 2023, and then we're going to see if they start him on the roster or not. If he has a huge fall league, I could see him starting opening day with the Cubs next year. Now, that's me saying that here on August 8th, so I'm not banking it, but I'm just saying he has a great August, or not August, but has a great fall league and has a great spring, I would like, depending on how they do the offseason, I would not be surprised if Brandon Davis is a Chicago Cub on the opening day roster. I won't bank on it, but I will say that I would expect him to at least be on the Cubs roster before June of next year. And so if you got Suzuki and you got Happ and you go get maybe another bridge outfielder, maybe it's Ortega if they still keep him here, and then they call up Davis if he's playing well in Iowa, then you got 3 guys there that you feel really good about. On top of if they do go get one of those shortstops, and if Contreras is still here, you got him at catcher, and then after that, it's like we're going to be finding out. I could tell you the rest of the guys, depending on how the rest of this the rest of the season goes. Like I'm high on Christopher Morel. I'd like to see Nelson Velasquez play a little bit more. Maybe he's a solid DH for next year, or fourth outfielder / DH. And then, we got to see what Madrigal is going to do the next 2 months. It's been bad. It's admittedly been very bad, man. Like
he's been bad, unfortunately.
I hope that these last 2 months he gets it going. He had some really good swings on Friday. Had 2 hits. He had a hit yesterday. So hopefully he gets that going and we get just some sort of optimism for him going into 2023. Obviously Nico Horner is probably your shortstop, but if they do go get one of those top 3 shortstops, just move Horner back to second, right? And then Madrigal can be like a guy off the bench. Morel probably at third. Maybe he can play all over the field, though, so he doesn't have to play third every day. There's a lot of different options, and we just got to see some of these guys play it out. They got to add maybe one more just versatile guy for depth. If Zach McKinstry doesn't pan out to be what anything that the Cubs really like, again, a guy that they got for Chris Martin. I mean, I thought that was okay. The fact that they got a guy who was basically getting blocked by the Dodgers because of all their good players. To take a run on him, that's fine. I don't have anything against it. Yeah, has his start to his Cubs career been great? No, it hasn't been great or anything yet. But once he's getting some consistent playing time, so we'll see if he has a good couple weeks coming up, and hopefully we see something. I don't know, but the main thing for sure is the pitching. They need to add a number 1 starter, and then they got to continue to really grow that farm and see some
starting pitching come through the system. That's always been a big problem for the Cubs, developing starting pitching.
We need to see Killian. Killian had a really good start in his last start at Iowa, so you're hoping that he builds off that and we see him in September or something like that, right? Like there's a lot of dudes Jordan Wicks and DJ Hers are in Double-A too. Right now, we're gonna see and from all things, it shows that they've been pitching really well in Double-A too. So I think that there are a possibility that we could see next year. Definitely Jordan Wicks. I don't know about DJ Hers, but definitely Jordan Wicks. There's a lot of high upside guys in that farm pitching wise, and the Cubs have a slew of them. So I don't think all of them are going to be really good, but you hope that those ones that came back in the Chris Bryant trade and your number 1 draft pick from 2021 are, because if they aren't, then I'll join the rest of the crowd who's out on Jed Hoyer. The only reason that I'm not out on Jed Hoyer is because he's just doing what he had to do that Theo didn't want to do. And I'm Theo Epstein's biggest supporter. He's the reason that the Cubs won the World Series, and he's also basically at least 75% of the reason why the Cubs are in this situation now, because he didn't trade whether it was Bryant or Baez, and he didn't, or Schwarber or whoever, he didn't trade those guys earlier, and he also just he couldn't develop pitching sooner. Justin Steele was drafted by Theo Epstein, but he didn't come into the league until last year. They just did not have any pitching come through the farm sooner to help bridge the gap to the next World Series team, to avoid a rebuild like this.
Right.
I personally just don't really see why a lot of people think that it's going to be a 2024, 2025, that will be when the team is finally good again. I think they can be at least in the division race next year if they do
spending money. Yes,
right. If they start spending,
a big question mark when it comes to the Ricketts right now.
Right, and I'm not someone who blames the Ricketts for everything. I understand the criticism, no doubt, but Jed did spend to go get Stroman, and he did spend to get Suzuki, and the thing that bothers me the most is that they just needed maybe one or two more pieces, and maybe this team is significantly better. I mean, I know they're like 19 or 20 games under 500, but they've also been in a lot of one-run games. It's not like they're getting blown out every night. They had a lot of injuries, which Jed hasn't blamed injuries for anything, but those happen, and they clearly don't have the power from the left side of the plate. And that was the one thing the one other thing they needed on offense to really change that line a little bit. Again, not that this would have been a playoff team or whatever, but because I came into this year thinking at the very least they'd just be a 500 team. I stupidly said on the CHGO Cubs podcast that maybe this team could win 87 games if everything went right, and I wanted to believe that was going to happen, but it clearly didn't. So it is what it is. I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. But I will, again, I think that Jed Hoyer, he's done everything that he had to do to try and get everything back afloat. And I get the criticism. Some people said that maybe they shouldn't have traded all three of those guys last year. But right now, I mean, it doesn't look like it was a bad decision. I know Rizzo's having a really solid year, but he's really obviously benefiting from the ballpark he's playing in on most nights. And obviously he's hurt right now because of his back again. I don't know. Rizzo's the one that I always thought was going to be a Cub forever, but and as someone who Chris Bryant's biggest fan, I wanted them to keep him no matter what. Well, he's had more injuries with the Rockies in year one than he ever did with the Cubs in one season. And Javi Baez has been one of the worst players in baseball this year. So we're going to see how all those play out in the end. But right now, the Cubs wouldn't be any better if they even had one of those guys. So it is what it is. And some people don't want to get over it, and I get it. But sometimes you just got to move on, man.
Yeah.
It's just what you got to do.
Yeah. We don't want to be stuck in too much of a nostalgia, but we understand, because I think a lot of us, myself included, we're so disappointed because it's like what if type of situation with the Cubs, So there is no question that this offseason will be a very, very huge one where the Cubs management and the ownership's commitment will be put to the test, without a doubt. I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to ask you this question. We're going to wrap it up because I know you have to probably start getting for the the post-game show on CHGO and also start to pay more attention to the game right now where the Cubs are leading 3-0 at the bottom of the third right now.
I didn't even know that. Thanks for telling me.
Sorry about that. I hope I didn't spoil you there. But we're going to wrap it up with this question, and we'll wrap it up in a couple of minutes. David Ross, I know I've been on your channel and asking questions, and for the record, I'm not asking or just demanding him to be fired because I think he has been dealt a pretty bad hand, unfortunately, with the players that he has had so far this year. My question is that have you seen enough improvement in which you feel confident about David's managerial stuff? Because I know he kind of played Hayward, Ortega, kind of like a seniority based type of ordeal. I don't know if Jed was telling them to play those guys just to enhance their value or not. Who knows? But now that the trade deadline has passed, obviously he has to prove himself. That he's learning, he's growing. And then on top of that, obviously, the Cubs have to feel very good about, the direction that the Jed and his coaching staff are doing before they said, okay, we're ready to commit money so that David can finally have a better team and that he can be the manager that we hope we want him to be. Is that a crazy assumption, or where do you stand on the David Ross and his managing style this year?
Yeah, and I remember when you sent that comment in our YouTube chat, and I wasn't trying to put you down or anything.
No, I wasn't either. Yeah.
Okay. My thing with David Ross is and this is solely my opinion, and not everyone has to have it. I get everyone has an opinion about the manager of a baseball team, but I just do not value the manager on a baseball team as much as some people do.
Yeah.
Now, I do think Joe Madden was a big part of the 2016 team because he was able to keep guys loose and they just went out there and played, and like he took off all the pressure of that team and like the 108 curse and all that. I do think that was a thing. But the difference between that and David Ross, even this year, is like light years different. I mean, this team just wasn't put together to win. I mean, as much as I tried to speak it into existence, like this team has just not been good. Now, I won't say that I think he's been great and that he is, great, the best manager this team's ever had, but I will say that, given the circumstances, I've seen worse. And I think that one of the reasons the Cubs like him is because he's someone who probably, I don't want to say he's just to sit in the dugout and listen to whatever Jed or Carter or scouting guys are telling him, but I will say that he is more analytically driven than Joe Madden was. And I think that David Ross manages the bullpen better than Joe Madden ever did. And I think that he gets his guys up to play for him, because there's many times where this team could have just threw it all away and just been done and like clearly showed that they quit on the season. This team's coming to play every single day. Like, he's getting guys to play for him. I don't know how he does it, but he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that David Ross, if the Cubs are supposed to be good and the Cubs eventually are kind of like what Joe Girardi was with the Phillies this year, and the team is mediocre at best, or even like the White Sox, when you stick to Chicago sports, like everyone thinks that Tony La Russa should be fired. I mean, the team is mediocre. They should be running away with this division. Is it all his fault that they're not winning games at a pace that they should be? I mean, I don't think so, just with the way that I think about managers. But when you're in a year where the White Sox are supposed to be World Series favorites and they're as mediocre as they are, sometimes you gotta do something to change things. And that's just how I feel about David Ross in this moment, where this team was going to be bad whether he was the manager or not. That said, there have been some times where, he's made some moves where I'm like, I don't understand this. What are you doing? And, it's pissed me off. But I just don't think it's often enough to where I think that he is the reason the Cubs are losing games. I don't think he's the reason that, the Cubs are this far below 500.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel. Now, again, if the Cubs make moves in the offseason and go into 2023 with some expectation to be in the division race, and they aren't, then I might change my mind on that. So I just think at this point it's like, and this is why I said on the show, like, I think it's a lazy take, because it's like someone could just look at the box scores every day and say, oh, this team sucks. What's the manager doing? You know what I mean? I think anyone looking at this team in 2022 and seeing this roster and seeing how young it is with all of these guys that aren't going to be part of the next Cubs team that's good, I think blaming the manager for all of that is, like I said, lazy. So I just think there's other reasons, or there's like at least 10 or 15 more things that have led to why the Cubs are not good. And I think David Ross is, the 15th worst thing, or the 15th worst problem with the Cubs right now, which means that it's not really a problem.
Right.
So we'll see how I feel around this time in 2023, man.
Yeah.
I get people with their frustrations with the manager and stuff, but people were calling for Joe Madden's head too. In 2018, when the team won 95 games, to me, the manager just really doesn't bring, it doesn't
move the needle for you then.
Yeah. Now, again, all it does to me, if your manager can get players to play for you and get up and play every single day, and then can manage a bullpen at at least a solid level, that's those are the two things that I really care about with the manager. If they can do that, then I think they're a good manager. So I just haven't seen enough bad from David Ross. He's just been given a really shitty situation. He gets hired in 2020. He led that team to the 2020 division championship, if you want to call it that, and then last year, they started off good, but then hit that losing streak. How you want to blame David Ross for an 11-game losing streak or whatever it was that led to the sell-off? A lot of people think they were selling off no matter what. I don't know. It would have been wild to see them sell off if they were in the race. But
Absolutely.
And then this year, they were out of it in June. So again, not perfect, but I just think there's bigger problems at this point.
Well, I hope the Cubs shows significant commitment this offseason, so that David Ross can get a fair shot at managing a much better team next year. We already know that the Cubs and the Cardinals are playing in London. Obviously, if you're going to go to London and you don't want to put up a crappy team, and obviously the Ricketts are well known in the London, UK area after their failed attempt to buy FC Chelsea, using Ken Griffith's billionaire money, and then was met with a massive criticism. So I hope that at least the Ricketts will, again, I hate to repeat myself, show serious commitment before we can draw a fair analyst and judgment on David Ross's future. Cody Delmendo, Cubs reporter for the CHGO. Follow him on Twitter and also go to CHGO website. They do a fantastic job covering both the White Sox and the Cubs pregame and postgame. I know you guys are doing the postgame show after the game tonight, right?
Yeah. Follow or subscribe to CHGO Sports on YouTube. Follow the Twitter account, CHGO Sports, which will eventually show you where you can follow the rest of CHGO's team-affiliated accounts, CHGO_Cubs if you're just a Cubs fan. We try to keep it lighthearted over there for how bad this team is. We try to have fun. A lot of people don't get the jokes that I'm trying to make on it, but it is what it is. I can't please everyone. But yeah, if you're into Chicago sports, it's a great website and YouTube channel to at least give it a shot to. And if you like it, subscribe, and you'll be able to read all the written content and a lot more.
Well, Cody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I know you guys have a terrific group of writers also covering the Bears. Adam Hogue is with the team. Nicholas Moriano is also joining, working for CHGO as well, this training camp. And, I hope to reach out to both of them for, coming on our show down the road as well. We do a lot of, Cubs-centric show once the season kicks off, as well as before the NFL kicks off. We'd love to have you on again at some point to discuss the, maybe 2023 baseball season preview, where the Cubs stand in the National League, and as well as the rest of the league. Good luck to you in your future. I wish you nothing but success, and we hope to have you guys on again. Thank you so much tonight.
Thanks again for having me, Stephen.
Thank you so much. And the AA team will return right after this break.
Dan, do you prefer the method of having altering?
No, because Mark Trestman did that and Matt Nagy did that, and arguably they're the worst two coaches in the history of the franchise.
You're forgetting John Fox. He squeezes in there, baby.
Did Fox do that too?
I think so.
Fuck that. Put the C on Fields and leave it there.
Exactly.
Come on, man. We're going to Baltimore. The Wire is the best show of of all time. And I've never seen such riveting TV where I actually felt like I was in East and West Baltimore every single episode. And it was just absolutely riveting and captivating from season 1 all the way to season, to it finished up.
And I'd put True Detective up there. McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. I mean, come on. It was just so well shot, so well written, directed. Like, I feel like it's underrated as far as that list goes. Really good.
And welcome back to the Double A team. My name is Stephen Nagishi. Going solo tonight. Ken Fang, my co-host, is dealing with the sickness, so unfortunately he's not with us. But we hope to have him back on 2 weeks from tonight on our upcoming show. Which, by the way, we are very, very excited. We're hoping this is the scheduled guest, Mark Followell, play-by-play announcer of the Dallas Mavericks. He happens to be a colleague of Jeff Skinwade, who we had last month. Tommy Tran from CBS Sports and James Cole from DirecTV. Both were recently attending the Asian American Journalists Association convention out in Los Angeles. So we are very excited to have both of them working for the network to talk about their role, the mission of AAJA, as well as the talk upcoming NFL season. Well, I'm going to do a quick monologue before we close out the show, and I appreciate each and every one of you hanging out and listening to us tonight. We hope you really enjoyed our show. Our first guest, Nick Watanabe, associate professor teaching sports management at University of South Carolina, and Cody Delmendo, Cubs reporter with CHGO YouTube sports show. This past week, we had two significant passing in the sports world. Bill Russell, a legendary basketball player, the only person who's won more championships individually than anybody else, passed away. And I feel kind of injustice talking about Bill Russell because, Ken is from the East Coast. He's a big Boston sports guy and obviously know the history of sports in Boston. Bill Russell himself has dealt with a lot of racism, in a city that is, for the lack of better terms, has been known for being such a racist. And, Bill Russell having put up with that such treatment, despite all of that, won 11 championships and helped build the Celtics into a dominating team, help usher the NBA era, with the Celtics versus the Lakers, among the notable rivalries that we know in the NBA. And then the passing of Vince Scully, a very, very famous voice, doing the Dodgers for a long, long time, dating back to the Brooklyn days. And when they relocated to Los Angeles, obviously was a voice of the Dodgers. When I first moved to U.S. back in the late 80s, in 87, obviously, the baseball season had already finished. And then I started watching baseball locally, when the baseball game was still on local television. This was KTTV Fox 11, which was a local channel, Fox affiliate. And I fell in love with the, Major League Baseball, listening to Vince Scully, Don Drysdale, the legendary Hall of Fame pitcher, the late Don Drysdale, I should say, call games on television and radio. It was so fun watching, the Dodgers, the 88. We all remember the Kirk Gibson homer and, the Dodgers winning against the powerful Oakland A's with Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco, the Bash brothers. It was such a wonderful time. And, for old school fans, people might remember Vince Scully used to do the NFL games and, during the 70s and 80s, before Jack Buck took over, the CBS games. And and then eventually John Madden and Pat Summerall called games for many, many years and entertained us throughout the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And the impact of Vince Scully is probably equivalent to what the Chicago fans listened to with Harry Carey with the White Sox, but he's obviously well known more for the broadcasting the Cubs on WGN, and even with the sports becoming so national, and with the technology, you can watch every game now with the palm of your hand with the phone and streaming and everything. The local broadcaster leaves a strong impact for those of us growing up, watching the sports when it was somewhat still pure and innocent, where we don't have to worry about the owners and players bickering and the salary cap and, the players bickering with the fans on Twitter or on social media, et cetera, et cetera. But, two legends who unfortunately passed away so quickly. And we wish both families, our condolences, and we will always remember their voices and what they stood for in times like this. Well, I'm going to wrap up the show. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks. As you can see the scrolling at the bottom, we hope to have another great guest on our show, and Ken will hopefully be healthy and be able to join us again for another edition of the Barroom, the Double A Team on the Barroom Network. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for watching our show and supporting us, and have a great night, everybody.